Ambrosia Hall. That name meant everything. To the world, it stood for elegance, exclusivity, perfection. To me, it was more than that. It was proof that I could build something untouchable. I didn't start with much, just an idea. An idea that I could create a place where only the best people could gather. The wealthy, the powerful, the people who mattered. When I opened the doors for the first time, it wasn't much. A small space, a handful of tables, but the vision was already there. I knew what I wanted it to be. Not just a restaurant, a sanctuary for the elite. I was obsessed with control. Every detail mattered. The plates had to shine. The wine list had to impress. The servers had to move like dancers, flawless and silent. The music, just soft enough to fill the room without overpowering it. Every piece of the puzzle was mine to place, and it worked. People started coming, not just to eat, but to feel like they belonged. You didn't come to Ambrosia Hall for the food, though it was perfect. You came to be seen, to be recognized, to prove you were part of something special. That's what I sold, belonging, and people bought it. As the years went by, I expanded. Bigger dining rooms, private spaces for VIPs. My guest list became a who's who of the city's elite. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities. They all came to me. I wasn't just a restaurant owner anymore. I was a gatekeeper. People respected that. They respected me. I decided who was allowed in. I decided who belonged. But there was a cost. You can't build something like that without sacrifices. I worked long hours, missed birthdays, missed holidays, relationships. Forget it. Everything I had, I poured into Ambrosia Hall, and I was proud of it. I loved walking through the dining room, hearing the hum of conversations, the clink of glasses, seeing people basking in the glow of what I'd created. That was my reward. Of course, not everyone belonged. I made that clear. Some people weren't right for Ambrosia Hall. Maybe they didn't dress the part. Maybe they didn't act the part. Sometimes I couldn't even explain it. It was just a feeling. But when I made those decisions, I never doubted myself. I believed I was protecting the image of the restaurant, protecting my vision. People knew the rules, even if I never said them out loud. And for years, it worked. Ambrosia Hall was untouchable. It was perfect, or so I thought. Because the cracks, they were already there. I just didn't see them. I was too focused on keeping everything under control, on making sure nothing disrupted my perfect little world. And then, one night, the Colewoods walked in. Adrian and Naomi Colewood. I didn't know them at the time, of course. To me, they were just another couple. They'd made a reservation. Anniversary dinner, I think. They looked the part. Adrian in his suit. Naomi in a stunning green dress. Polished, elegant. But something about them, I don't know. They didn't fit. Not the way I wanted. When they walked through the doors, I smiled, of course. Professional, polite. But in my mind, I already knew. They weren't Ambrosia Hall people. So, I did what I always did in situations like that. I showed them to the table closest to the kitchen. The table no one wanted. The one that said, "You're here, but you don't belong." They didn't complain. They sat down, thanked me, and started their evening like they didn't have a care in the world. But I cared. Oh, I cared. I watched them all night. Their laughter, their smiles. The way they didn't seem bothered by the delay in their appetizers, or the server who barely paid attention to them. It was like they were untouchable. And that got under my skin. I thought, who do they think they are? But they didn't give me a reason to act. They were polite, gracious. They didn't break the rules. They didn't challenge me, at least not directly. Still, that night stuck with me. Something about them stayed in my mind, like a splinter I couldn't remove. I didn't know why, not yet. But looking back, that was the beginning of the end. I just didn't see it. Not then. The Colewoods. That's where it all started to go wrong, though I didn't know it at the time. To me, they were just another couple who didn't belong. After that night, I thought I'd forget about them. Just two faces in the sea of guests that passed through Ambrosia Hall. But they stuck in my mind. Not because of who they were, but because of how they acted. They weren't angry. They weren't flustered. They just sat there, calm as anything, like they were in complete control. That's what bothered me. I'd seen people like them before. People who didn't fit the image of Ambrosia Hall. Usually, they'd leave feeling small, out of place. I made sure of it. But the Colewoods? They were different. It was like my attempts to diminish them didn't even register. They sat at the worst table, waited for their food longer than anyone else, and still walked out smiling. And that smile, it stayed with me. A week later, I received a letter. Not from the Colewoods, but from a law firm. Fancy stationery, bold lettering, the kind you only see when big money's involved. It was an offer to buy Ambrosia Hall, a buyout. The price? Let's just say it was enough to make me stop and think. Enough to secure my future, my legacy. Enough to make me wonder. I'd never thought about selling before. Ambrosia Hall was my life. But the number on that letter, it tempted me. I wasn't ready to retire, but a deal like that? You'd be a fool not to consider it. So I called the firm, set up a meeting. I expected to meet some corporate type, a businessman with a portfolio, someone who saw my restaurant as a shiny new toy to add to his collection. Instead, the Colewoods walked into the room. I didn't recognize them at first. They were dressed differently, still elegant but professional. Not like guests, like they belonged in that boardroom. "Mr. Ashcroft," Adrian said, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting with us." It took me a moment to process what was happening. These weren't just some random diners. These were the buyers. They sat down across from me, calm as ever. Naomi opened a folder and slid it across the table. "We're here to discuss the future of Ambrosia Hall," she said. The future of my restaurant? I didn't like how that sounded. Adrian continued, "We believe Ambrosia Hall has untapped potential. It's already a symbol of excellence, but with the right leadership, it could be more. Much more." I wanted to laugh. The right leadership? I'd built that place from nothing. It was mine, my vision, my work. What could they possibly offer that I hadn't already done? Then they mentioned the price. It was higher than the number in the letter. Much higher. Enough to make my head spin. But there was a catch. Naomi leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "For the sale to go through, there are conditions." Conditions? That's when the conversation turned. Adrian laid it out. If I sold, I'd have to walk away completely. No involvement, no public statements, no lingering ties. And, here's the kicker, I'd agree not to open another restaurant. Not in this city, not anywhere. They didn't just want to buy Ambrosia Hall. They wanted to erase me from it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why would I agree to that?" I asked. Naomi didn't flinch. "Because it's a good deal, Mr. Ashcroft, and because if you don't, well, let's just say people might learn more about the way you treated certain guests." It hit me like a punch to the gut. They were talking about that night, about them. I wanted to fight back, to argue, but I couldn't. They had me cornered. If word got out, if people knew how I decided who belonged and who didn't, Ambrosia Hall's reputation would crumble. My investors wouldn't stand for it. My clients would walk away. The restaurant wouldn't survive. They knew it. And now, so did I. I was trapped. I tried to keep my composure, to act like I still had the upper hand. "I need time to think," I said. "Of course," Adrian replied, standing up. "Take all the time you need, but the offer won't stay on the table forever." And with that, they left. I sat there in that boardroom, staring at the folder they'd left behind. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room, The other part of me couldn't stop thinking about the number written inside. How had it come to this? How had two people I dismissed as unimportant turned the tables on me so completely? I told myself I'd never sell. Never. Ambrosia Hall was mine, and no one could take it from me. But deep down, I knew the truth. They already had. I couldn't sleep after that meeting. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Adrian and Naomi Colewood, sitting across from me, calm, composed, and in control. Control. That's what I always had, what I'd always prided myself on. And now, for the first time, I felt it slipping through my fingers. I spent days trying to find a way out, a loophole, a counteroffer, something. But no matter how I looked at it, I knew the truth. They had me cornered. The problem wasn't just the offer, it was the risk. If word got out about how I'd treated them, about how I decided who belonged at Ambrosia Hall, it wouldn't just ruin the restaurant, it would ruin me. I built Ambrosia Hall on an image, a reputation. It wasn't just the food or the decor, it was the exclusivity. The idea that being there meant you were part of something special. But exclusivity has a dark side, doesn't it? And the Colewoods were holding that mirror up to my face. I tried to push it aside, to focus on the practical, the money, the numbers, the security the sale would give me. But every time I thought about signing those papers, something inside me rebelled. It wasn't just about the restaurant, it was about me, my pride, my legacy. For years I told myself I was untouchable, that I'd earned the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. And now, here I was, being forced to admit I was wrong. I didn't want to admit that, not to them, not to anyone. So, I delayed. I told the Colewoods I needed more time, that I was considering their offer. But really, I was stalling, hoping for a miracle. That's when the letters started. Not from the Colewoods, from my investors, my partners, people who had backed me, trusted me, supported me for years. They'd heard about the offer. Somehow, word had leaked. They wanted me to sell. Walter, one of them wrote, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Don't let your pride get in the way." Pride. That word kept coming up. And every time I heard it, I felt like I was being stabbed in the chest. They didn't understand. Ambrosia Hall wasn't just a business to me. It was my identity. Selling it wasn't just a transaction, it was a surrender. But the pressure kept building. My investors started calling, asking why I hadn't accepted. Clients began to whisper, questioning why the restaurant was in the news. Even my staff noticed the tension. I was losing control. And then, one night, I made a mistake. I called Naomi. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could reason with her. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid of her. She answered after a few rings. "Mr. Ashcroft," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I wasn't expecting your call." I tried to keep my tone steady. "I've been thinking about your offer," I said. "There are complications, things you might not understand." There was a pause. Then she said, "Enlighten me." I hesitated. What could I say? That I didn't want to sell because it felt like admitting defeat? That I couldn't stand the thought of them taking over what I'd built? Instead, I said, "Ambrosia Hall is more than just a restaurant. It's my life's work, my legacy." Naomi's voice softened, but her words hit hard. "And what kind of legacy do you want to leave, Mr. Ashcroft? One built on exclusivity? On shutting people out?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. She continued, "We're not trying to destroy what you've built. We're trying to make it better, more inclusive, more welcoming. Isn't that a legacy worth having?" I wanted to argue, to push back, but her words stayed with me long after I hung up. Was she right? Had I been building my empire on the wrong foundation? I didn't want to believe it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the cracks had been there all along. The Colewoods hadn't created them. They'd just exposed them. Still, I wasn't ready to let go. I went back to my investors, tried to convince them we didn't need to sell, but they didn't want to hear it. They saw the Colewoods offer as a lifeline, a chance to secure their profits before anything went wrong. "Walter," one of them said, "you built something incredible, but if you hold on too tight, you're going to lose everything. Lose everything." Those words haunted me, because deep down I knew they were right, but admitting that, accepting it, that was something I wasn't ready to do. Not yet. You want to know the truth? I held on too long, longer than I should have. The Colewoods were patient, but the pressure was relentless. My investors, my partners, even my own instincts, they all told me the same thing. Let go. Take the deal. Move on. But how do you walk away from something that defines you? How do you let someone else take the thing you built with your own hands and do it their way? I couldn't do it, not at first. So I delayed. I made excuses, told myself I could find another way. But the cracks were getting bigger. The whispers were growing louder. And then it happened. A client, a regular, asked me directly, "Is it true you're selling? To them?" The way he said it, that venom in his voice, I knew what he meant. I tried to play it off, said negotiations were ongoing, but he pressed. "You're letting them take over Ambrosia Hall?" I snapped. I told him it wasn't his business, that he didn't understand what it took to run a place like mine. But the damage was done. The rumors spread. People started talking about the Colewoods, about the sale, about why they were interested in my restaurant in the first place. And then, the worst part, the whispers about me. The staff started murmuring. Clients started asking questions. "Is it true, Walter, about the Colewoods, about how you treated them?" I tried to brush it off. I told myself it would blow over, but it didn't. The Colewoods didn't have to say a word. The story told itself, and the more people talked, the more the truth started to come out. It wasn't just about that one night. It was about all the nights, all the times I decided who belonged and who didn't, all the subtle, quiet ways I kept people out. People started looking at me differently. The investors were furious. "Walter," one of them said, "you've put us in an impossible position. If you don't sell, the reputation of this place is gone." And they were right. So I gave in. I called the Colewoods, told them I was ready to sign. Adrian was polite, professional, even kind. Naomi? She didn't gloat. She didn't rub it in. She just said, "Thank you, Mr. Ashcroft. You won't regret this." But I did. Oh, I did. The day I signed the papers, it felt like the end of everything. I sat there in that boardroom, pen in hand, staring at the documents, my name on every page. It was surreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart. But it wasn't someone else. It was me. When I finally put my signature down, Adrian shook my hand. "You've built something incredible, Walter," he said. "We'll take good care of it." I wanted to believe him, but all I could feel was the emptiness. I walked out of that building with a check in my pocket and nothing else. The Colewoods didn't waste any time. They transformed Ambrosia Hall. Oh, they kept the name, the elegance, the luxury, but they opened the doors. Suddenly, the place I'd built became something different, more diverse, more welcoming. The critics loved it. The public loved it. And me? I watched it all happen from the sidelines. I tried to stay away, but curiosity got the better of me. One night, I called for a reservation. "Name?" the hostess asked. "Walter Ashcroft," I said, waiting for the recognition. There was a pause. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ashcroft. We're fully booked." Fully booked. I hung up. I didn't even argue. Now, here I am, alone in a small apartment on the edge of the city. The wealth I made from the sale means nothing. The people I once called friends have moved on. And Ambrosia Hall? It thrives without me. I built that place to be exclusive, to keep people out. The Colewoods turned it into something better, something I could never have imagined. And the truth? They were right. I was wrong. But knowing that doesn't make it hurt any less. You want a lesson from all this? Fine. Here it is. Pride doesn't just blind you, it destroys you. And me? I let it.